Welcome to Storm the Gates, Book 3 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera.
Part 8. Chapter 29. The Dragons Are Coming. A little while ago, Layla flew so fast the fog beneath her blurred, then vanished as blue water took its place. I hope I'm in time.
Stop, this is a no-fly zone.
A voice thundered as a blue dragon dropped from the sky and crashed into the sea, throwing a wave over her. If it's a no-fly zone, then why are you flying? Layla almost asked that aloud, but she gritted her teeth instead because she really shouldn't antagonize a dragon, even though she wanted to. Thankfully, she was incorporeal right now, so she flew through the wave. Maybe it loosened her control a bit because she shouted at it anyway, and probably antagonized it too. I can't stop. Someone's attacking heaven. You can either come with me or regret that you didn't for all eternity. Layla slowed as a large blue hand with claws as long as her legs passed in front of her, and an idea struck her.
You must stop. Look, I'm not trying to be a jerk. It's dangerous for your kind to fly across the barrier between the gray between and heaven. You could fall through the gap and get lost forever. Do you really want that to happen?
Asked the blue-bearded dragon. No. Are there more of your kind? Layla landed on the dragon's hand when he turned it, palm up.
Yes, there's maybe a dozen of us right now. Why do you ask?
The dragon studied her with glowing violet eyes. Layla sat cross-legged on his hand. Can you call them?
Maybe. I've never tried before. You mentioned an attack. If there was one, I would have seen the attackers cross the sea, and I assure you, I would have stopped them. But I didn't see anything of the sort, just the fairy taking souls to heaven like usual.
Well, that explained how the attackers reached heaven. They must have hijacked the ferry. So you didn't hear the rallying call? Layla was pretty sure he didn't. Maybe only angels could hear it. It seemed to resonate in her soul like a struck gong. No, I heard nothing of the sort. If you were just in the gray between, how did you hear it? How do you know heaven is under attack? You're not there, you're here, in the sea. The dragon waved his other hand around to show that she didn't fly far from the gray between. Its benighted shore stood maybe a couple of miles away, but its fog stayed away from the beach. I heard the call to arms. At least she was pretty sure that's what she heard, although she felt it more than heard it if she was being honest. But heaven called, and her angelic nature wouldn't allow her to turn away and ignore it, even if the adversary was putting his new plan in motion right now, and he probably was. That devil never waited for anything. Layla closed her eyes and searched for the fabric of the unseen. If I can call snakes and speak through them, then I can call their supersized relatives with wings too, or so she hoped. Finding the unseen was so easy, she nearly fell over when her fingers struck its dark threads right away. But it made sense that it was close to the surface here, since the unseen was made of spirit, thoughts, wishes, dreams, and a lot of other stuff that cast no visible light. Everything that possessed magic created an indentation in the unseen, so Layla felt along its dark fabric for a dragon-shaped one. The first one she found belonged to the dragon in front of her, as she expected, and that confirmed she could locate dragons this way. That was a relief, because she wasn't sure this would work, but that never stopped her from trying. Layla cast her senses further away. Where are your dragon friends?
What are you doing?
Asked the blue dragon, as water splashed, probably because he lashed the sea with his tail. I'm checking something. Layla tried not to grin when she found the other 11 dragons. They stood in a ring and chatted about something. Who knew dragons like to gossip? I shouldn't be surprised by that since they're as intelligent as I am, and I love a good chat about current events. Technically, angels didn't gossip, but they could talk about events. Layla twisted the threads that made up the unseen into a link and threaded it through all the dragons' minds. Once that was done, she could just speak and they'd hear her. I'm sorry to bother you like this, but heaven's under attack. I don't know who attacked them or why. I just know heralds wouldn't trumpet a call to arms if this wasn't a serious situation. So, will you help me repel the attack?
Yes, of course we will. I promised to help some bossy angels, but I thought I should tell my friends what's happening in case they want to join in,
said one dragon. That was welcome news. Unfortunately, there wasn't time for such niceties as names. Great, then let's go. Layla patted the hand she sat on, then pointed toward heaven, so he knew she was talking to him now.
There's really an attack in progress?
The blue dragon squinted at her, like that might help her see the truth. Yes, your fellow dragon just said so. Now let's let's go before all chance to toss the enemy out passes, and all we're left with is the mopping up. Layla pointed at the sea, lapping at the dragon's spiky back. All right, I suppose it can't hurt to go see what's going on, but you're not riding on my hand the whole way. The blue dragon sighed as she lifted her, and his breath stank of fish. He deposited her on his head, in between his horns. Layla wrapped an arm around one of his horns, and she was glad she did when he took off like an arrow shooting through the water. 11 more dragons joined them as they crossed a dark, curving line that divided the sea and the sky. Darkness crashed into Layla. When she came to, she still lay on the dragon's massive head. What just happened? She rubbed her temples as she sat up and gripped his brow ridge.
The transition from the gray between to the realm of heaven knocked you out, as it does to most angels. That's why this is a no-fly zone,
said the blue dragon in that you-should-know-better tone that grated on her nerves. She just had to lecture her about that. Lightning bolts lit up the sky as 2 silhouettes rolled around, and that thankfully ended the lecture before she said something to anger her savior. Only one antagonist had wings. What am I looking at? She squinted at the forms until she made out one angel and one white-hail muscle-bound guy who might be an ex-god of lightning or some related magical ability. A dragon, not the one she rode on, thankfully, leapt out of the sea and caught the struggling men, then separated them, so she held the angel in one purple hand and the ex-god in the other.
Why did you do that? I had everything under control,
said the scowling, dark-haired angel as he squeezed his body out of the dragon's grip. Sure you did. Layla shook her head at his protest and fixed her eyes on the gates. They looked different from the last time she saw them, and they were a lot taller and covered in climbing creatures. From this distance, she couldn't make out what the creatures were, but they didn't belong here, so they had to go back to wherever they came from. There, you see, heaven is under attack. Now it was her turn for a well-deserved "I told you so," but she refrained.
I see that,
said the blue dragon, but he didn't sound at all sorry for questioning her, nor did she apologize either.
Who are you?
asked the male angel as he hovered over her. He sounded familiar, but she didn't feel like digging through layers of memories for a name. If he wanted her to know who he was, then he'd introduce himself. No one you know. Layla scanned the gates and tried to count the attackers. Why were there 2 ships parked in front of the gates? Is that how those attackers reached heaven? Why did some creatures jump off the gates and swim back to the larger ship? Layla grabbed the threads of the unseen and felt for the places where magic warped it. She wasn't surprised when those places were on the gates themselves. Someone's making the creatures jump into the sea and swim back to the larger boat. She only knew one angel who could do that, Arjanil. He must be around here somewhere, but the dragons made too much noise as they swam and they drowned out his voice. Well, she had other ways to locate friends and foes. Once more she reached into the unseen, and this time she followed it to where it curved around a man's shape. That must be Arjanil. But he wasn't alone, she saw when she opened her eyes and looked at the spot where she felt his magic.
So you got the dragons to help us,
Daniel said as she swooped down and landed on the blue dragon's head. Yes, but I'm not sure what to ask them to do other than to pull the creatures off the gates. Do you have a plan? Layla rose and flapped her wings. Since she already crossed over to heaven, she should be okay to fly now, and to hell with the no-fly rule. She had wings, and she intended to use them as much as possible.
Of course we have one. It's not a great plan as plans go, but it's all we have.
Daniel caught her hand and pulled her into a hug. Then she told her the plan. It wasn't bad as plans went, but it needed a few refinements, and Layla told her so.
That could work if your scaly friends are amenable.
Daniel nodded when they separated, and her brow furrowed in thought.
What are you 2 plotting? And who is she?
The angel the dragon saved flew in between them and scowled at them both. What was his problem?
You'll see, and I think you'll like the plan.
Daniel grinned and waved for her to follow.
Come on, Layla. Let's put it into action.
Do you want to tell the dragons, or should I? Layla gestured to the dragons. They'd almost reached the gates.
You'd better do it, since I'm persona non grata to them. I'll check on our friends.
Danielle waved to Arjanil, Natalie, and the Black Angel sandwiched between them. Then she flew over to join them, but the scowling archangel hovered there and glared at Layla like she offended him somehow. I don't have time to deal with his issues. Layla didn't feel like shouting over the loud splashing of the dragons, so she wove the dark threads of the unseen into a link and threaded it through all 12 dragons' minds so she could tell them all the plan at once. Here's what we need to do. To her surprise, 2 dragons cut her off.
We already know the plan and have shared it. Just tell your friends to stay out of our way. We can take things from here,
they said almost in unison. A purple and a pink dragon peeled off from the pack and rose out of the water so they could pluck creatures off the gates. Since no one here had a physical body and thus no one could get hurt, they tossed the creatures over their scaly shoulders, and somehow, probably because of the dragon's magic, the creatures landed on the main deck of the larger boat.
What about the ones that bypass the gates? How will you round them up?
Asked the archangel with an attitude. You have 2 working wings. Why don't you round them up yourself? Layla jabbed her finger into his robe-covered chest as his glowing eyes lit up at that idea.
That's a great idea. Danielle?
He spun away from her and scanned the sky for Thaniel.
What do you want, Azriel?
Thaniel appeared behind him and tapped his shoulder to make him spin around again.
Come with me. We have demons, ex-gods, and fallen angels to round up.
Azriel grabbed her arm, then shot upward so they could fly over the gates.
How do we keep them from jumping overboard and swimming for the gates again?
Asked an exhausted Arginil as Natali flew him and another angel over to her. Can you use your gift to keep them on board? Layla hoped he could, because she didn't know if she could corral them. Of course, she'd try.
I don't know how many more minds I can hold,
Arginil said as his shoulders slumped. The dark-skinned angel behind him didn't look at all familiar, so she probably didn't run into him in the before times. That angel, name unknown, clung to him, and his hands glowed like he was sharing his light. Good angel. Arginil needed more power right now.
Can you help?
Natali asked as she flapped her wings to keep the trio aloft. Yeah, of course I will. Let me think for a minute. There might be a way I can fence them in. Layla hovered beside her new friends and sought a solution to their problem. The unseen wasn't hard to work with, but this was a job for someone with elemental magic. Unfortunately, they didn't have anyone on hand with water or earth magic, so it's up to me and Arginil to keep everyone on board. I'd better weave a fence in the unseen. Since the unseen was made of spirit stuff, it should work. Layla reached into it and started weaving dark threads together into a net large enough to cover the ship. This will work. It had to, since they had no other options, and those invaders had to go right now. I just hope there's still time to stop the adversary after this.
Chapter 30. A Short Fall. Earlier. I will win in the end. It's inevitable, shouted the adversary as he fell into darkness so total it would have scared a lesser immortal, but not him. He embraced the darkness and ran his hands along it, seeking the threads of the unseen, and they twined around his fingers at his lightest touch. Return me to my realm, for I am the prince of darkness and lies. The unseen molded to his will and became a dark tunnel without any lights to guide him. But he needed no light as his hands grazed the walls of the tunnel. It wasn't wide enough to fit his wings, so they remained folded on his back until the tunnel ended in a dark cloud. He was the only fallen who still had wings, and he smiled as they punched out and caught the chilly wind. The adversary shot out of that cloud into the luminous orange skies of hell. He was also known as the Morning Star, and long ago as Samiel and a bunch of other names, but the name he preferred now was the Adversary, since that's what he was, the enemy of all life. It's time I reminded every creature to fear my name, but he needed an army for that since he lost the previous one, when those fools knocked him into the collapsing gateway. Oh well, there are always more damned souls in hell. He chuckled as he flew over a barren land dotted by ruins toward a black tower looming over the rocky plain. The tower rushed toward him, and so did the narrow platform between sharp metal points that rose above the spire's black roof. The adversary landed on the platform with a clang, and draped his wings over his shoulders like a feathered cloak. 2 guards exited the staircase in front of him and gripped their weapons. With a wave of his hand, the dark threads of the unseen wrapped around the guards and yanked them down onto their knees in front of him. Their sharp claws scraped the black roof and their eyes burned with anger, but they couldn't rise until he let them. When they realized this, the 2 low-level demons bowed their heads to hide their anger. Pitiful, but useful, the adversary shook his head at how easily he bested them. He could crush them with the power at his beck and call if he chose, but then he'd have no one to deliver his message.
What is thy command, my liege?
Asked one demon who bent his head low, offering his blue-skinned neck to him. A cruel smile played across his lips, but he suppressed the urge to lop off the demon's head. Now was a bad time to start killing messengers. Besides, he needed these 2 to carry his commands into the spire. Its prisoners would become his new army. Tell the other guards to open the cells and bring all the prisoners to my palace. I need them for something important. important. Fail me, and I will hunt you down and scatter the pieces of your essence so far and wide, you'll spend the rest of eternity in pieces, forever drifting but never reconnecting. The adversary flicked his wrist and released them from his hold as a gong reverberated in his bones.
Yes, my lord, we'll see it done.
The two demons rose and bowed to him before backing toward the stairway with their heads down. Good, don't fail me. The adversary turned away from them and searched the sky for the herald trumpeting a call to arms that sounded in his soul, even though he was no longer an archangel of heaven. He was forever banned from there. He gripped his chest as that summons wrapped around his heart and squeezed it. Why do you call for aid? He wondered about that until he recalled his other backup plan. Did my subordinates actually follow orders? It sounded like they had. Who's leading the charge into heaven?
I never did like you or your stupid crown,
Lionestra said as she crouched and pried his hand off the edge. And her words stung his pride even in memory. Did she lead the army to heaven? It was possible. Lionestra was a born general. She could command his army without him, with the right incentive. Are you trying to get back into my good graces after you turned on me? Attacking heaven was a bold move, even for her. Why are you carrying out my plan without me after turning on me? It sounded that way, if the gong and the trumpet he heard were correct, and they must be. Herald angels didn't make mistakes. What's your real plan, Lionestra? Is it the same as mine? He could only assume it was since she was doing exactly what he planned to do before he was cast into the collapsing gateway. If only I weren't barred from heaven, I would fly back there and take control of my army. But he was banned, and there were no more gateways and thus no more loopholes for him to escape through, for now. But there would be one as soon as he gathered a new army. The adversary straightened as feet pounded up the steps behind him. The trumpet fell silent as he whirled around and lashed out with the unseen, sending its threads flying. They struck the demons at the top of the stairs and knocked them down. Bring the prisoners to my palace now. They will become a new army, and together we will conquer the mortal world. The adversary retracted the threads of the unseen and launched himself into the air. Powerful wing beats carried him away from the spire, where the guard should get up and carry out his orders. Ahead, a city appeared on the blasted plain, and beside it loomed the fortress-like library of forbidden knowledge, under a shining yellow shield. I wonder who cast that. It didn't matter, since his plans lay elsewhere for now. But he dipped a wingtip and flew around the library in a lazy spiral, examining its wards. Later, he'd crack that shield open and take the treasures hidden inside. But not now. He had something more important to do before the fools who sent him back to hell realized what the next stage of his plan called for. After one last circuit of the shield over the library of forbidden knowledge, the adversary flew the couple of miles to his palace, ignoring the damaged buildings and debris the gateways left behind. He landed inside the gates, and the white marble building gleamed in the orange glow of the sky as he approached his sprawling palace. Not a stone lay out of place here, since the gateways landed in a neighborhood far enough from here to shield it from its destructive power. He threw open the ornate double doors and strode through a hallway of mirrors to his throne room. Inside, gray-robed Versailles stepped through one of a dozen portals that ringed the room and placed the time crystals they found on the stack in front of the dais. The adversary clapped his hands to get their attention. To their credit, all the Versace in the room dropped to one knee and bowed their heads, as they should. Rise and listen. I have another job for you. The adversary lifted his hand, indicating they should stand. The Versace rose slowly, like they didn't trust him, but they kept their eyes downcast, so he couldn't confirm that. Oh well, it didn't matter if they trusted him, as long as they obeyed orders. The adversary let his wings rest on his shoulders and enfold him like a feathered cloak. As he glided across the white marble floor, the gathered Versace parted to give him room. He picked up a smoky gray time crystal. It was so small and dull, but such a trifle anchored a piece of time itself. He opened his hand and let the crystal fall on the knee-high pile.
What is your command?
One of the Versace asked, snapping his attention back to them. Gather up the time crystals and cast them into the abyss. The adversary spun on his heel and left the throne room. Behind him, the Versace hurried to obey, and he smiled. Soon the abyss would release their energy, and he'd build a new gateway across time and space, and no one would stop him from destroying all creation, starting with the mortal immortal world, the Creator's most beloved creation. I'll cover that world in ashes and flames.
Uriah appeared in a marble hallway and hoped the flash from his teleportation spell didn't draw any unwanted attention, especially since he heard voices where there shouldn't be any. Didn't the jerk who built this place take all his flunkies with him when he left? Not judging by the voices and footsteps he heard, and that was a bad sign. How did he get new servants so quickly? Uriah checked both ways, saw no one about, and hurried toward the sound of many people doing something they probably shouldn't be doing. I hope they're just looters, but in his heart of hearts, he knew they weren't, and he cursed his luck. Why did I have to grow a conscience now? He didn't know, but he grew one. Because of that damned conscience, he couldn't leave his fellow gods and goddesses in prison for eternity, not when he could do something about it. But first, he needed to know what he was up against. They still might be looters. Since the sounds came from the throne room, he crept toward that was still possible, but he wouldn't know until he checked. So Uriah soundlessly glided across the marble floor, using every trick he knew to keep quiet. When he reached the wall the throne room shared with this hallway, he grasped the threads of the unseen and twisted them around him until it faded from sight. Only when he was certain no one could see him did he stick his head through the marble wall, using more of the unseen's dark power, and his heart sank at what he saw. Gray-robed demons rushed in and out of glowing portals to other places, carrying pale gray crystals that gleamed ominously in their gloved hands. That can't be good. What are they doing with those crystals? The Versailles placed them on the pile in front of the dais, and a cold shiver skittered up his spine. Are those time crystals? They probably were, because that's what the Adversary stole in the Gray Between. How did they get so many? The answer was as obvious as it was disturbing. The Versailles jumped through those portals and stole them from somewhere, then brought them back here. What does the Adversary want with them? Probably not anything good. Uriah cursed his luck again. I didn't have to come back here. I could have gone somewhere else now that I'm free. But he wasn't free yet, and he wouldn't be as long as his fellow cellmates were locked up. Uriah cursed, then froze as someone threw back the doors. No one can see me while I'm wrapped in the unseen's power. That was the benefit of using it. It granted invisibility, and that was the easiest use to master since the unseen's power wasn't visible. The Adversary strode in like he owned the place and clapped his hands, and the Versailles dropped to one knee and bowed their heads, almost in unison.
Rise and listen. I have another job for you.
He waved for them to stand, and they did, but they didn't rush to do it. The Versailles stepped aside to create an aisle for the crownless king of this hell realm to pass through. Then Samuel just stood there, admiring something.
What is your command?
One of the Versailles asked.
Gather up the time crystals and cast them into the abyss.
Samuel spun on his heel and left the throne room amid a swirl of loose feathers. Uriah pulled his head through the wall and slumped against it while still clinging to the threads of the unseen, so he stayed invisible. What's he planning? Uriah could only think of one thing. The Adversary wanted the Versailles to throw the time crystals into the abyss. What would the abyss do if they landed in its viscous black fluid? Not anything good for anyone, that's for sure. He wrung his hands. What can I do about it? Well, he could teleport back to the Gray Between and tell his new friends about the Adversary's latest plan. Maybe they'd go to hell to stop him. The more he thought about that, the more he liked the idea. Yes, he should get out of the palace and get help. This wasn't something he could stop on his own, not when there were dozens of Versailles, and it only took one to drain him into unconsciousness. I can't let them get the chance. He shivered as he recalled his first run-in with the Versailles. Then he didn't know anything about them, but ignorance couldn't save him from their draining touch. When he awoke, bars surrounded him, and so began his imprisonment under this palace. I'm free now, and I'm not going back into that cell. So that meant no more skulking around. It was too risky. I should go now, before they notice me and tell someone that Samuel is playing with time crystals again. If he hurried, maybe he could catch Arginil, Guerren, and Atali. They might not be enough to stop this, but 3 allies were better than none. Uriah let go of the unseen and thought about the foggy gray place he just left until the image was so clear in his mind he should be there, not here. A bright flash engulfed him as he disappeared. He just hoped he could find someone who could stop him in time.
Chapter 31. Too many theories. Rosalie waited for one of her captors to answer her question or release her. She'd take either at this point, preferably before the ever-present fog swallowed them. It crept closer, as the other versions of her looked at each other. Didn't they have a plan? I guess not. Maybe that's why I won the right to keep existing forever. Just the thought of living forever made her knees go weak and her head pound. What would she do with that much time, other than go as crazy as Pristina? I'd like to skip the crazy part. Could she do that? Probably not if she kept talking to alternative versions of herself. Well, how do we figure out why Pristina targeted us? As Rosalie asked that, she remembered what Faye said. Wait a minute, how could Pristina target us when she couldn't travel backward or forward in time? Now that she thought about the little Faye said about Pristina's powers, which were hers now, the less that made sense.
She's immortal. She could have just waited 20 years and picked the first woman she ran into, which could have been us,
said one copy who wore the same dress and trousers, and she shrugged like that wasn't important when it certainly was. It was eerie seeing that since the tailor who made the dress only created one copy. I didn't run into Pristina before I went back in time to that haven, but she ran into a witch in the market under Mount Eredrin. Could she have been Pristina in disguise? The question plagued her as Rosalie twisted her arms to free them, but this goddess thing didn't come with an increase in strength, just a longer lifetime, since she was just a glorified anchor for time. Thinking back on that meeting, Rosalie tried to remember every detail about the woman. She wasn't as tall as Istiana, but Faye proved that not all goddesses were tall. That woman was matronly, but Pristina could have worn many layers to disguise her figure. What about her face? Could Pristina cast illusions? Because the witch from the market didn't look like Pristina, nor was she ageless, like that dead goddess. I don't think the woman from the market was Pristina. She didn't tell me to go back in time. She just pointed out evidence of something wrong in our time, and I don't think Pristina would have done that. Rosalie pushed such speculation aside. All 12 copies of her furrowed their brows, as if they were also reviewing every interaction with another woman and checking those memories to see if any were Pristina in disguise. Their grip loosened on her arms, and she pulled them free of their grasp. What was our connection? There must be one. It's too bad I can't just ask her. That raised an interesting question. Where did ex-goddesses go when they died? Rosalie glanced at the fog that surrounded her. Could Pristina's ghost be here, in the gray between? How could I find her? Rosalie stepped forward as she scanned the fog rising around her. Instead of bouncing off the copy of her from another timeline, who occupied that spot? She stepped through that, Rosalie, and the other woman disappeared. What just happened? Rosalie patted her chest to make sure she was whole. She was. Where did that alternative version of her go? None of the other Rosalies answered. Instead, they ran toward her as if they had the same thought. They slammed into her until only one copy remained, and she just stood there staring like she figured out the answer. Why did they do that? Rosalie staggered as the versions of her from another timeline became part of her. Hazy memories from each one flickered at the edges of her vision, but she ignored them.
because that's the only way they can live on as part of you.
Her doppelganger shook herself out of her thoughts and shrugged like that should be obvious. Why aren't you interested in that? Rosalie wished there was somewhere to sit, but the gray between was just gray fog and not much else. And she couldn't sit on the fog. She'd fall through it if she tried.
Because I don't want to go on, not as part of you. I made mistakes, and I need to pay for them,
said the only remaining copy of her as she turned away. You're the one I saw in the Haven. You said you set everything in motion, but how is that possible when Pristina can't time travel? Rosalie chased after her when her double ran into the fog rather than answer her. When she caught up, she reached for the woman's hand, but the other woman stopped.
I went back in time with my Avarian, the same as you did, but we landed there months before the summoning. Somehow, we got separated,
she said so quietly Rosalie strained to hear her. Then you met Pristina in disguise? Rosalie suggested. But the other woman shook her head.
No, I met one of her flunkies, but I didn't know that at the time. To make a long story short, she volunteered to help me get Ivarian back.
Let me guess, the wild hunt captured him, right? Rosalie rubbed her forehead as the pieces fell together to make an ugly hole.
Yes, I traded the summoning spell for him. Then we returned to our time. I didn't know then that spell would come back to bite us both.
The other woman kicked the fog curling around her legs, but it didn't go away and bother someone else. That explains how they got the spell, but not why Pristina targeted us. Rosalie stepped around her double so she could look her in the eyes.
I think Mom ran into Pristina when we were a baby, and knowing how abrasive Mom can be, I think she angered Pristina. Then that bitch put some kind of tracking spell or hex or something on us. That's my theory.
Why didn't she go after Mom? This was the first Rosalie ever heard of this, but it was more plausible than anything she came up with.
I don't know, maybe Mom had powerful friends. She's not exactly talkative. At least the version of her I knew wasn't. Yours may have been different.
The other woman hugged herself. My mom wasn't an open book or anything like that, but she would have told me if a goddess cursed her or me, so I doubt she knew anything about it. Rosalie hoped not. Mom could be secretive, but she wouldn't keep something like that from her, right? I wish I could ask her. An idea niggled at the back of her mind as running running footsteps interrupted the quiet that settled between them. Rosalie turned to locate the sound. Did you hear that?
I'm sorry for my part in this, but maybe I can still make things right,
said the last version of her from an alternate timeline. Before Rosalie could ask what she was sorry for, the woman collided with her. She staggered as memories of a life like hers struck her, and the world turned gray and wheeled around her until muscular arms wrapped around her waist and held her up. Ivarian, she breathed, hoping he found her at last. They had so much to talk about.
No, the name's Uriah, actually. Have you seen an angel, a gray-robed half-angel, and an ex-war god anywhere? I need to speak to them right now,
said a male voice in her ear as disappointment that he wasn't Ivarian swamped her. No, I haven't seen anyone like that. Rosalie steadied herself and stepped away from him. He let his arms drop away from her.
Damn, because I really need to talk to them.
Uriah ran his hands through his hair, and the strands changed color as he scanned the fog bank covering the gray, dusty ground for miles in every direction.
Where could they be?
What do you need to tell them, and what are you? I'm sorry if I'm being rude, but I've had a strange day and I'm not feeling very trusting right now. Rosalie backed away from him.
It's not rude, and I'm a god of the underworld, if you must know. My news concerns that realm, actually. We're all in grave danger if I don't find my friends.
He said the word friends like he was surprised he had such a thing. Wonder transformed his handsome face as Uriah smiled at the realization that he had friends. That was great for him, but the grave danger part made Rosalie approach him cautiously. What's happening in your realm, and how will it affect everyone? She knew she'd regret asking that, but curiosity had her in its jaws and it wouldn't let go until she found out. Rosalie rested a hand on his arm when he didn't answer right away.
I can tell you,
said the last person Rosalie expected to meet in the gray between. Pristina's ghost floated out of the fog, and she laughed.
Maybe I won't tell you. You'll just have to find out for yourself. It's better that way.
You have no power over anyone or anything anymore, Rosalie said, more to remind herself than to remind Pristina.
True. Thanks to you, I'm finally free. Perhaps I will tell you as a thank you for that. I was tired of existing, but unlike other immortals, we time gods can't die, not until time ends.
Pristina spread her arms to show how unfettered she was. She was truly mad.
That's all right. I saw enough to know what Samiel is planning.
Uriah grabbed her arm and yanked Rosalie away from Pristina. What did you see? And where did you see it? Rosalie had to run to keep up with him, but they weren't going anywhere because there was nowhere to go, just endless miles of gray nothingness. Somewhere in this foggy realm, there was a hill and a portal back to the mortal world, but that probably wasn't where Uriah wanted to go.
The adversary has a pile of time crystals. I didn't stop to count them, but he probably has 100, maybe more, and he wants to throw them into the abyss.
Uriah kept running, even though nothing appeared on the horizon. What will happen when he tosses them into this abyss thing? Rosalie ran too, and only the fact that she ran most days allowed her to keep up the brutal pace he set. He must see something other than fog, because he marched like he had a destination in his sights.
The abyss is in hell, of course, and when he throws the time crystals into it, they will break, and time will break too.
That must be what Layla saw when she went to hell. Rosalie stopped and stared at him, but he pulled her onward, and she ran so she didn't fall on her face. If he was right, then her sacrifice would be in vain unless they stopped the literal devil. How did he get the time crystals? Even as she asked that, she remembered the teleporting demons she killed and the gray crystal they dropped. So that's what they were doing. Rosalie squared her shoulders and marched on at his side. How do we stop him?
We find my friends, then we all go to war.
Uriah smiled at the thought, and she did too, because why not? It wasn't any crazier than anything she'd done already to save her timeline, and this might just fix it. Layla, if you can hear me, I know what the adversary is doing, and I need your help. Hell, she needed Faye's help too, but how could she summon that fiery ex-god? Hopefully Faye went to hell after we parted ways. How do we find your friends? Rosalie asked when nothing appeared on the horizon.
We follow that rainbow to a hill. There's a beach on the other side, and that was the last place I saw them, so it's the logical place to look for them.
Uriah pointed at a faint patch of sky that wasn't the same gray as everything else. Then let's go. Rosalie ran toward it, determined to reach the only landmark she knew in this place as soon as possible. Then she'd go to hell, where all the bad souls went, and end this timeline madness once and for all.
broken arrow. Ivarian scowled at the woman in a white dress that appeared next to Sarn. She looked just like him, so he wasn't kidding when he called her sis, because there was no one else she could be other than his sister.
What did you need?
Sarn caught her arm.
Well, Atiri Rand told me a strange story about you getting sucked into a crystal, but he's clearly mistaken.
Sarn's sister glared at him. Ivarian tried not to wince at the name of the man who was his friend and then his rival for Rosalie's affection. Guilt tried to stab him, but he fought it down and missed some of what the siblings discussed. Who are you, and why are you interfering with my revenge? Ivarian accosted Sarn's sister, but she held her ground and transferred her glare to him. Sarn's sister sure was feisty, just like Rosalie. She even had dark hair the same color as Rosalie that hung past her shoulders in a loose braid that was half falling out.
You look familiar. Are you on my list?
He pulled out a scroll and unrolled it, revealing sketches of faces. Sarn's sister ran her finger down the list, then tapped it.
Yes, you are. Here's your face right here. You've been a naughty boy and you need to come with me. I don't know what you did, but you're wanted for it and I need to score some points with my new boss, so let's go.
Sarn's sister jerked her thumb over her shoulder.
Can you drop me off on the way? I don't want Rand to worry too much.
Sarn shook her arm to get her attention. I'm not going anywhere with you. Ivarian snapped his fingers as he pictured the arrow of time, and white light ate the world.
Yes, you are.
Sarn's sister seized Ivarian's arm and pulled him out of the light.
Ouch. What was that spell? It's really cold.
She shivered, but she didn't let go of his arm. How did you do that? No one can stop a time walk. Ivarian tried to shake her hand off him, but she just tightened her grip, like his struggles meant nothing to her. That was impossible. She didn't look that strong, but she was tall. Sarn's sister was only a couple of inches shorter than him. Then I must be no one, and here I thought I was someone. Oh well. Sarn's sister batted her glowing violet eyes and smiled. Why did she have a halo?
What's a time walk?
That's my gift. I can go backward in time or forward to my present, or I could until my time ceased to exist, and that's your fault. Ivarian pointed at Sarn as shadows gathered behind him. Maybe the goddess of vengeance finally showed up?
How is that my fault?
Sarn stared at him like he could find the answer if he looked hard enough for it. I'd show you if she'd let me. Ivarian tried to pry Sarn's sister's hand off him, but she dug her long fingers into his arm.
No, I need to make my boss happy, and you'll do nicely for that. You can show us without me letting go of you, because that won't happen until I take you in.
Sarn's sister glared at him like she meant business. She was just as tenacious as Rosalie, and she was probably the same age as Rosalie before she died. Fine, I can show you my time without taking us there, since you won't let go. Ivarian slashed what remained of his left arm through the air and felt for a rent in the fabric of reality with his disintegrating stump. But it must be thinner now, because his stump pushed through it into the icy realm of the arrow of time, and he felt along the ice shelves within reach for the moment in time that tore his heart out of his chest. His fingers were gone on that hand, but he felt them sliding along the ice shelf like some remnant of his hand still existed outside time. He shook off that weird sensation as his phantom fingers grasped a head-size ice chunk. It broke off, but it didn't fall. He felt it sitting in his missing palm as he retracted his arm stump. Ivarian jerked his arm out of the tear and stared at his transparent fingers holding the ice chunk for a moment before lifting it until it was eye level. Images formed inside it of a clearing surrounded by withered trees. A statue stood in its center. No, this was the wrong moment in time.
It looks just like you.
Sarn's sister whispered to her brother, because it's a statue of you. I came from an alternative future that no longer exists. It wasn't a nice place, so I don't regret it disappearing, but that future existed because something happened to you. Ivarian pointed at Sarn again with the hand that didn't fade away yet because his ghost hand was full. He didn't remember seeing that statue in the dying forest, but Ran was sentimental like that. He could see the mage erect a statue to his father, but that wasn't why he was here. You weren't there to stop the army of demons when they came, so they conquered everything and enslaved the survivors. We fought back, but we couldn't win. Then my friend wanted to save the future, and we needed to go back in time to figure out how to do that. That's where everything went wrong. Ivarian's hand shook as he pointed at Sarn, and anger boiled within him, not just for the mage, but for his uncle too.
Then why did you capture me?
Sarn scowled like he still didn't understand. Was he that dense?
Wait a minute.
Sarn's sister finally let go of him. Ivarian couldn't rub his wrist, since his ghost hand held a large piece of ice, so he shook his arm out instead. That would have to suffice while he could still feel something.
I stopped the army of demons already. I had help from my friends, so it wasn't all me, but I played a significant role in the takedown. We shut the portal before an army of demons could leave hell, so I'm happy to report that the demon war is canceled.
Sarn's sister held her head high and beamed with pride at her accomplishment. Her words struck Ivarian like physical blows. How could Sarn's sister have stopped the demon army that Rosalie dragged him backward in time to stop? It didn't make sense, unless this was a different timeline than the one he grew up on. Oh God, no. What have I done? Ivarian pressed a hand to his brow as the chill of the arrow of time reached for him, and he thought he heard his uncle's voice. What's Uncle Hithagler doing now?
I need to get him to my superiors to get them off my back. Then I need to bring you to my nephew so you can dry his tears. He's really worried about you.
Sarn's sister ticked off her points on her fingers.
I hoped he wasn't.
Sarn glanced away. I'd rather die than go with you. Ivarian produced a knife, but Sarn slapped it out of his hand like he did that sort of thing often, and a green glow faded from his fingers. Why did you do that? I've got nothing to live for except revenge, but I can't even get that right. As he uttered those words, the ground beneath them trembled.
O winter tree, thy branches bend, and thy branches twine, and they make a trap for a mage, an archangel, and a demigod, for me to bind.
The same woman from before sang. Maybe she would finally arrive and take on Sarn like she agreed to do.
Who said that?
Sarn glanced around for the singer, but she was nowhere in sight. Neither were the branches she mentioned, and the shadow was gone too.
A better question would be, where are you? Answer that first.
Sarn's sister grabbed Ivarian's arm again before he could evade her. The haven's gold shield disappeared, and a wintry forest surrounded them. Deep snow crunched underfoot as they all staggered to catch their balance. Trees swung their branches and wove them together, just as the song commanded, into a circle around not just Sarn and his sister, but Ivarian too.
O winter tree, thy branches weave so prettily.
The woman sang, but where was she? A woman wearing a black dress descended on 2 sets of wings. As she spread her arms wide, glowing eye-shaped glyphs covered them. Her black skirt twisted like a living thing around her glyph-covered legs, as a sword appeared in her clasped hands, pointed at the gray clouds swirling above her.
I see injustice, and I came to slay it.
What's happening?
I may have made a mistake. Ivarian shielded his face with his arm as more glowing bits floated away from it like snow in the wind.
What did you do?
Sarn's sister shook him. I needed help to get revenge because I can just time walk. That's all my magic does. I couldn't fight even the weakest earth mage with that skill set. Ivarian glared at her.
Who did you ask for help?
Sarn's sister looked like she already knew the answer. Ivarian just pressed his lips into a grim line and shook his head. They'd find out soon enough.
Did you find a wrath? Is that what she is?
Sarn's sister shook him one last time, then released Ivarian. The woman with the eye glyphs raised her sword and muttered something about how she saw all injustices. Lightning bolts struck her blade and ran down her body, charging her. How long until she was at full power and ready to do whatever she came to do?
Sis?
Sarn turned away from the snow pelting them.
Not now, bro. I need to figure out how to defeat a wrath with unknown powers.
Sarn's sister fidgeted.
Do you know which wrath you made a deal with?
Ivarian stared at the ground and shook his head again. He wouldn't tell her anything, and she didn't have the power to make him either. Sarn deserved whatever Morgana's mother dished out. Even if this is a different version of Sarn? Asked his conscience. The question staggered him. What if he was punishing a version of Sarn that didn't collapse the spell circle or cause Rosalie's death? Ivarian tried to ignore that still, small voice inside him, speaking his doubts aloud until white light blinded him. When it faded, Sarn and his sister disappeared, leaving Ivarian with the goddess he made a deal with. The woman with glowing eye glyphs lowered her sword and glanced around.
Where did they go?
I don't know. I wasn't listening to their conversation. Ivarian wished he had heard what they planned. He tried to let go of the ice chunk, but his ghost fingers wouldn't unclench.
No matter. I can find them anywhere. After all, I still have a bargain to fulfill. But to do that, you need to free me.
She regarded him with glowing white eyes. How do I free you? Ivarian shook the hand clenched around the ice chunk. It was stuck to his missing hand, and that was probably a bad sign since this piece of ice came from the arrow of time. It shouldn't have broken off or traveled back with me. Things must be worse than he thought.
A few drops of blood should do it.
Morgana's mom shrugged like that was no big deal. Maybe it wasn't to her since she was an ex-goddess. Take what you need. Ivarian thrust out his fading arm, and she didn't bat an eye at the transparent hand clenched around an ice chunk. Maybe. She saw strange things every day. She grasped his fading arm above the elbow and positioned it so she could stab the point of her blade into his forearm. One quick jab with the pointy end and blood darkened his sleeve. She dipped her fingers into the wound and he winced as she ran her bloody fingertips up the length of her sword.
There, that should do it. Now, I just need to find the mage you want me to judge.
She stabbed her blade into the ground and covered the wound with her hand. Crystalline walls appeared around them, and they shattered as the dull ache in his arm disappeared. Was that her prison shattering? The crystal walls vanished as she lifted her hand away.
That should fix the wound. Now to search for the one you called me here to judge.
She grasped her sword and raised it as a gray fog swirled around them, obscuring everything.
Help me stabilize this,
shouted the man Ivarian met outside the haven, making him jump. What was his name? Genar, maybe? I wish I never went inside. Ivarian closed his eyes. He vaguely recalled Genar saying something about being the ex-god of memory or something. Why is he working with my uncle?
I am helping. Open your eyes and look if you don't believe me.
Uncle, Heatheglair shouted, and he sounded like he was right there as the fog rose and thickened until it was a pale gray blur. Snow pelted Ivarian, and more snow crunched under his boots as he squinted into the wind. Where am I? Snow covered everything for miles as a loud crack made him turn and run away from the ice block bearing down on him. Thankfully, the house-sized ice block stopped before it flattened him. Where did that thing come from? Large chunks of ice of equal size lay here and there like they broke off something huge, like the arrow of time. Is that where I am?
Then why isn't your plan working?
Because someone's messing around with the timeline.
Uncle Hithiger shouted back as a gray fog rose from the snow and encircled Ivarian again.
Then make them stop doing that.
Jinar shouted back. What on earth were they doing? Before Ivarian could ask, the fog shot up on all sides of him and everything whited out again.
There you are. I lost you for a moment.
Morgana's mom said as she appeared in the fog next to him, still holding her sword point up toward the gray sky.
I think I have them.
Before he could ask where they were, the fog thickened and the ground disappeared under his feet. He fell a few inches until his boots struck the ground again. When the fog dissipated, Morgana's mom was gone. In fact, he hadn't seen Morgana since they got something to eat at that restaurant under Mount Erdron. His memories grew fuzzy after that, until her mother showed up. I wonder where she is. Ivarian wondered that for a moment, before he saw Sarn sitting on the side of a bed, patting the back of the boy, hugging him. That must be Ran. Guilt punched Ivarian as the child Ran tried to glance at him over his shoulder. He's not my friend anymore. What did he do to you except try to help? He didn't pursue Rosalie, but neither did you. You kept leaving her with him, said his conscience, and it was right, unfortunately. You can't escape me that easily, Ivarian said as he stood awkwardly on a cliff outside a wall that someone punched a hole the size and shape of a doorway through.
Look, you're not getting vengeance on my family, so you can forget about that.
Sarn's sister shoved her sleeves up as she marched toward the rectangular hole in the wall.
You're coming with me to the gray between and becoming someone else's problem. That's what's happening, so you'd better come quietly or you'll make me angry, and you don't want to do that. I can be very scary if I want to be.
Yes, she can. You don't want to make her mad,
Rand said as he squirmed in his father's grip.
Stop. Let me handle him,
Mom said as she appeared on the cliff too. Her face was smooth, but her eyes were bracketed by fine lines, and they held all of time in their depths. White hair cascaded down her back, and a series of shiny combs directed their fall, giving her a regal air. Her gown was long, with shining filaments woven through it from her neck to the skirt's hemline, covering her shoes. Her sleeves were long and made of the same lace that wrapped around her modest neckline. But she was transparent too, and bits of her floated away in the breeze because this immortal goddess was dying, all because of him, and the realization gutted him. You're dying because of me, and you want to handle me? Ivarian advanced until he stood toe-to-toe with his mother. Where were you when I lost Rosalie?
You're the nice lady in the snow. You were decorating trees.
But that wasn't what Ivarian expected him to say, so she skidded to a halt and tried to figure out what Ran meant.
That wasn't me, but I think I know who it was.
Mom closed her mouth and didn't say who she thought did that, but Ivarian could guess. It must have been one of Morgana's sisters.
Is the person who did that still in the crystal?
Mirren pointed at where the crystal lay on the cliff, a few feet from Ivarian and his mother. Yes, she is. I call vengeance down upon all of you. Ivarian spun and dived for the crystal as a hand covered in glowing eye symbols extruded from it. Finally, Morgana's mom was coming. A bright flash blinded him again. When it dissipated, a woman in black robes with glowing eye-shaped glyphs on her arms stood, holding the star-shaped crystal.
Foolish mortals, no trap can hold me, especially not when someone summons me by name.
What do you want? If it's a fight, you need to wait until I recover. I'm not well enough to give you that right now,
Sarn said from where he still sat on the side of the bed and tried to corral his curious son, but Ran squirmed and tried to slide off his lap.
I don't fight. I punish those guilty of an injustice, and you stand accused of that.
She pointed at him.
So, is this like a court thing? If so, then I'm his advocate.
A teenage Myren pointed at Sarn as he tried to step step past his sister, but she blocked his path. While Sarn and his family discussed the teen's offer, Ivarian picked up the crystal. Morgana's mom shook her head.
No, there won't be a hearing. He called for vengeance, and I am her instrument.
A sword appeared in her hands, and it was covered in carvings of eyes, too. But the blood was gone. Maybe she cleaned her blade while he went to the Arrow of Time. I've never gone there by accident, and that worried Ivarian.
That's not true. You right injustices. You aren't supposed to cause them, and you will if you don't hear both sides before you decide.
Mom said as she stepped in front of the lady with the glowing eyes.
I call for a trial. Let the 7 truths decide their fate.
And if they decide to punish them?
The lady with the glowing eyes glared at Istiana, but she didn't back off.
Then I, Istiana, goddess of the past, will abide by their decision, and so will my son Ivarian.
She glared at him, but Ivarian remained silent and seething. Why did she take Sarn's side? She's my mother. She should take my side. Doubts niggled at him again. Was he doing the right thing? Ivarian rose from where he lay on the ground and dusted himself off with his good hand. I, Ivarian, a demigod with useless powers, a friend to a dead woman, and a refugee from a timeline that no longer exists, will abide by your decision, but I will have vengeance either now or in the past. None of you will rob me of that.
Then I, Vangiana, goddess of vengeance, righter of wrongs, will see this done. Prepare for justice.
She glanced over the edge, then white light blinded them all again.
You've been listening to Storm the Gates, Book 3 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when the next part publishes. The Rogue Gods Trilogy is available as an ebook and paperback, and now a full cast audiobook. Click the link in the description to order your copy. If you love the Rogue Gods Trilogy, then you'll love Melinda's other epic fantasy adventure books too. They're just as full of magic and mayhem, and characters who will do anything to achieve their goals. Check them out at the link in the description, and while you're there, sign up for her newsletter so her characters can talk directly to you. Thank you for listening.